The town wasn't expecting anyone that morning. No mail, no stagecoach, no riders, not since the mine closed and folks started packing out. Just another quiet day in Dead Man's Hollow. Then the wind shifted. And through the dust, she came. One woman. On horseback. No banners, no badge. No sign of where she came from or who sent her. But the town felt it, that change in the air. She rode down the main street without saying a word. Inside the saloon, talk stopped. Men stared through cracked windows. A poker hand froze mid-deal. Outside, the blacksmith stopped his hammer mid-swing. The general store owner leaned on his broom, watching. Her boots hit the ground. Slow, solid steps. She looked straight ahead. Not left, not right. And nobody dared speak. Some recognized her. Others didn't. But everyone understood the same thing. She wasn't here by mistake. She was here on purpose. For something. Or someone. Maybe to bury the past. Maybe to burn it down. In the silence, an old man muttered, "She came back." No one asked who she was. Because the kind of fear she brought with her didn't need a name. And just like that, everything changed. The peace folks had made with their secrets, the lies they'd told to sleep at night. All of it stirred. The sheriff's office door creaked open. A young deputy stood watching, hand twitching near his belt. But she didn't look his way. She didn't look at anyone. She just walked. Right through the center of town like she'd buried something beneath it long ago. And came back to see if it was still there. The preacher's hand shook as he lit a lantern. Midday. And somewhere in the hills, a rider turned back, too late. They say she came from nowhere. But that's not true. She came from fire, and left ashes behind. And Dead Man's Hollow? It just remembered what it means to be judged. The town sat quiet, too quiet for the middle of the day. Dead Man's Hollow wasn't always like this. Once, it roared with life, back when miners struck gold in the hills and everyone with a pickaxe and a dream rolled into town. Back then, the saloons didn't close, and gun smoke hung in the air thicker than fog. That was 20 years ago. Now, the wind howls louder than the voices, and the only thing that moves with purpose are the tumbleweeds cutting through the streets. The main road, once packed with wagons and traders, is nothing more than cracked dirt now. Boots don't tread here much anymore, just hooves and the occasional drunk stumbling from whatever bottle hasn't run dry. On the left stands the Broken Spur Saloon. Once it was the heartbeat of Dead Man's Hollow, loud laughter, piano music, whiskey flowing, and fists flying. These days, it holds on to what's left. The bartender, Jasper, keeps it open out of habit. He's got more years behind the bar than bottles on the shelf. The same few patrons haunt the stools, tired men with nowhere else to go. They drink not because they're thirsty, but because it keeps them from remembering. Every now and then, strangers wander in, hoping for warmth or a story. Most of them don't stay long. Across the street, the sheriff's office leans with age. The door's still intact, but no lawman's been seen around it for months, not since Sheriff Boone disappeared after a night of drinking and a trail of blood leading out past the old mill. Folks still cross the street when they pass the place. Something about it, even empty, makes a man uneasy. There's still a star on the wall behind the desk, tarnished and crooked. Further down the way is the Chapel Hill Cemetery. It's not a hill, and there's no chapel. Just rows of crooked wood markers sticking out of the dry earth. Names have faded, some never written at all. It's where folks go when they've run out of options, or when someone runs out of patience. The general store's been boarded up since last spring. Old man Keller, the owner, died behind the counter. By the time someone found him, the rats had gotten to the crackers. No one reopened it. And the mine? That gaping scar on the edge of town? It's been sealed for over a decade. Nothing but dust and stories pour out of there now. Some say the mine cursed the town. Others say the town cursed itself. People here live quiet, bitter lives. They don't ask questions. They've seen what happens to people who do. The preacher stopped preaching. The school closed when the last child left. Even the horses seemed tired. Dead Man's Hollow isn't dying, it's already dead. It just doesn't know it yet. But that day, the day she rode in, something shifted. It started with the dogs. They howled early, long before the sun had risen. Not the kind of howl you expect, not hunger, not warning, something deeper. Like mourning. Like the earth itself was grieving. Then came the silence. No birds. No wind, just stillness. So thick, it clung to the skin. Jasper said he felt it in his teeth. Others said they felt a pull, like something old was crawling back into the present. A heaviness that settled into the bones. And that's when she appeared. No fanfare. No thunder. Just the slow rhythm of hooves on dry ground. She came in through the south trail, where the fence posts lean like tired men. Rode past the windmill that hadn't turned in 5 years. Didn't stop. Didn't speak. Just kept moving, like she'd been here before. And maybe she had. Nobody recognized her. Not at first. But as she passed the old schoolhouse, Mrs. Whitaker, who hadn't spoken in 2 years, muttered one word, her. No one dared ask what she meant. But no one forgot it either. By the time the woman reached the town square, everyone had noticed. Men stepped out of their stores, women peeked through torn curtains. Even the kids, the few left, fell silent. She tied her horse outside the broken spur, like she knew it'd still be there. Dust clung to her coat, but she wore it like a shield. Her hat cast a long shadow across her face. Her hands, gloved, steady. Not the hands of a traveler. Not a merchant. Not a preacher. Hands like that only come from one kind of life, one that ends in blood. She didn't pause at the door. Just pushed it open and stepped inside. And in that moment, the whole town held its breath. Because even in a place full of ghosts, they knew something new had arrived. Not salvation. Not hope. Something else, something that didn't need to speak to be heard. Dead Man's Hollow wasn't always dying. Once, it pulsed with men chasing golden gods. But men are greedy, and gods stay quiet. What was built on gold was buried by it. And what stayed behind never left. Not really. The woman walked through the town like she'd been here before, even if no one dared say it. Behind closed shutters and cracked glass, whispers followed her like wind. They whispered about the night the chapel caught fire. About the girl they thought had burned with it. About the sheriff who vanished, the deputy who shot himself, the preacher who never left. Whispers don't die in Dead Man's Hollow. They grow teeth. The woman passed the old well. No one drank from it anymore. Not since the boy climbed out of it, pale and wrong, whispering names that didn't belong to the living. He never spoke again. They buried him next to the others, but no one visited. Not even his mother. At the edge of town, near the rusted mine cart that never moved again, 3 crosses stood crooked. No names. Just rope still swaying, years after the hanging. Folks said it was justice. Others said it was panic. The truth didn't matter. The blood had long dried. But the woman paused there, just for a moment. Like she remembered something nobody else did. Delilah kept her eyes on the woman from behind the bar. She didn't touch her drink. She didn't blink much. Years ago, she'd heard a name whispered through the floorboards. A name she was warned never to repeat. It was the same name she thought she heard when the wind howled the night before. She wrote it down once. Burned the paper. Didn't help. In the old schoolhouse, abandoned now, kids used to draw pictures in chalk, horses, hats, stars. Then one day, one girl drew a face with eyes all black and teeth too long. Said she saw it watching her while she slept. Her father whipped her for lying. That night, he vanished. The girl never drew again. Harlan Griggs hadn't spoken to anyone sober in 7 years. But now he sat still, bottle untouched. His hands shook, not from drink but from memory. He remembered the girl they found in the mine shaft. The one who was supposed to be dead. They buried her. Then she walked into town a week later and smiled at the preacher. Cain said it was a test. Griggs called it something else. He started drinking that night. He never stopped. Reverend Cain knelt before a cracked altar, hands clasped tight, not in prayer but in defiance. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He didn't think it'd be given. Not after what happened that night. The night the stars blinked out. The night the fires burned without heat. The night he watched a child bleed from her eyes and still smile at him. He never forgot that smile. He saw it again now. In her. They all thought the woman had vanished. That the desert had taken her. That justice, or revenge, or God, had claimed her, but there she was, moving through the town as if summoned by something older than fate. No one stopped her. Not because they didn't want to. But because something inside them said they couldn't. The woman reached the edge of the cemetery. The wind died. Not a sound. Not a bird. Not even the flies. She stood there, staring at the last row of graves. 12 in all. One of them didn't have a marker. It was dug, filled, and forgotten. But she hadn't forgotten. She never could. Dead Man's Hollow held its secrets like a clenched fist. But fists don't stay closed forever. Sooner or later, they open. And what spills out isn't always blood. Sometimes it's truth. Sometimes it's wrath. Sometimes it's both. And on that day, Dead Man's Hollow was about to learn what it meant to bury something too deep, and watch it come back with fire in its mouth. The first memory she ever kept wasn't a voice, or a face, or even a name. It was the heat. Not the warmth of a hearth or the sun on skin, the kind that crackled through wood and bone, devoured a home in seconds, and left a girl with nothing but silence and soot. That night was supposed to be ordinary. A family asleep. A barn full of hay. Horses tied down, tools stacked, dinner plates still unwashed. Then the riders came. Not for cattle. Not for coin. Just for ruin. No warning. No mercy. Just laughter and fire. Her father stood on the porch with a rifle. He got one shot off. He never got a second. Her mother tried to run. They caught her first. She remembers her brother pushing her down into the crawlspace. She remembers the voices outside, laughing while the beams groaned and split. The sound of boots on broken glass. The smoke crawling through the floorboards. And the stillness afterward. She dug her way out after sunrise. Her brother didn't come up for hours. He hadn't spoken a word until they buried the bodies. They never stayed in one place after that. A circuit preacher took them in. He preached on Sundays and hunted bandits the rest of the week. Said the Lord gave him both mercy and bullets. He taught her how to shoot, how to keep quiet, and how to lie like a lawman. She was 12 when she learned how to clean a shotgun. 13 when she learned to use one. By 15, she was tracking debts across counties, helping the preacher settle scores that didn't always belong to God. By 16, she was riding alone. By 17, she stopped calling him father. Her brother worked horses wherever they stopped. Quiet boy. Soft eyes. Always had a book with him. Said he wanted to read law someday. He never got the chance. They settled in a place called Westbridge. Looked clean on the surface. Polite folks. Smiling mayor. Quiet streets. The kind of town that made you think evil couldn't breathe there. That illusion ended fast. A man turned up dead outside the saloon. Her brother was found kneeling beside him. Blood on his boots. Knife in the mud. They didn't ask questions. They didn't look for prints. They found a name they could hang and made it happen. The judge rode in that night. Didn't ask for a jury. Didn't wait for sunrise. Gave a speech about order and peace, Said justice had to be swift to keep men afraid of their sins. Her brother didn't flinch when they put the rope around his neck. He looked at her, and he mouthed something she never repeated. They left his body swinging in the wind. She tried to stay quiet. Tried to forget. Even took work with the sheriff. Learned the ins and outs of the badge. How warrants worked. How to tell truth from lies. She wanted to believe in the system that killed her brother. Wanted to believe that justice was more than a word for rich men with clean boots. It took one lie to crush that hope. The silver vault at the courthouse was emptied. The name on the forged withdrawal form was hers. The testimony was bought. The gun was planted. The sheriff didn't believe it. But belief didn't stop the arrest. She spent 2 nights in a cell, waiting for a trial she knew wouldn't come. She didn't wait for the noose. She disappeared. For 6 years, she stayed in the shadows. Not hiding. Hunting. She followed names, deeds, stories that didn't make the papers. One by one, she found the people who betrayed the law and lived to toast to it. Some disappeared quietly. Others turned up face down in rivers. None of them pointed back to her. She was smoke, present, but never caught. Every name she crossed off brought her closer to one. Judge Ellery Finch. The man who held the rope. He left Westbridge, reinvented himself. Started calling himself a businessman, a civic leader, a man of morals. Moved west, deeper into counties too small to ask questions. He bought land. Bought men. Bought silence. And now he called Dead Man's Hollow his home. She didn't come here to ask why. She came to end it. The fire she came from never went out. It stayed in her lungs. In her knuckles. In her memory. It lit her path, 1 mile at a time, through lies and death and everything the law forgot. She didn't want redemption. She didn't come for justice. She came for him. And she wasn't leaving until the rope was around the right neck. She thought vengeance had a face. A face she'd memorized through trial transcripts, bounty sketches, rumors passed on in taverns, half-burned photographs, names muttered by men as they bled out. Judge Ellery Finch. She thought the road ended with him. But the grave behind the chapel had his name on it. She stared at the stone for a long time. She hadn't come all this way to bury a ghost. She hadn't burned bridges and names to stand in silence. Dead. Just like that. A quiet death. No trial. No reckoning. Just a headstone with chisel marks. But justice hadn't disappeared, it had taken a new name. Cain. Reverend Cain. The man behind the pulpit. The one who spoke like God owed him something. The one who stood where no one else did. People feared him more than the gallows. And when she asked why, they looked away. They always looked away. It didn't take long to find the rot beneath the robes. Cain was Finch's son. Born in silence. Raised in shadows. The judge had sent him away before the scandals. He'd returned with scripture in one hand, and something colder in the other. They called it the fold. It started as whispers. Men disappearing. Widows suddenly richer, children taken in by the chapel, only to emerge colder, quieter. He offered jobs. Food. Forgiveness. But every favor came with a chain. Below the church, hidden behind locked doors and stone, was something more than prayer. Records. Symbols. Maps of every plot, deed, and ledger in town. Cain didn't just speak for God. He owned the dirt the church stood on. And most of the souls above it. He hadn't inherited power. He'd rebuilt it. The woman didn't flinch. She'd faced devils with badges. Cain was just another liar wearing faith like armor. But this wasn't about her anymore. This wasn't just revenge. This was corruption wrapped in scripture. This was a town buried in silence. Every man in that town had something to lose. And Cain held it like a leash. She couldn't kill him like the others. Not yet. Not without burning down everything around him. Because this time, it wouldn't be enough to put a bullet in the head of the serpent. She had to pull out the root. But roots don't come clean. They tear everything with them. And the more she pulled, the more she saw just how deep the fold went. The bartender? His son had been taken for training. The undertaker? His debt was paid in secrets. The sheriff's badge? Sold years ago. Now worn by a puppet, every eye in the town had seen something. And every mouth stayed shut. She realized then, this town wasn't afraid of Cain's wrath. They were afraid of losing the lie they'd learned to live with. She didn't come here to save them. But she couldn't walk away now. Because Cain didn't just kill her brother. He inherited everything the judge built. And made it worse. This wasn't just vengeance anymore. This was war. She didn't sleep that night. She sat in the corner of Delilah's storeroom, staring at the floorboards like they could open and swallow her. By morning, 3 men had gone missing. 1 had talked. 2 others had been seen too close to her. By noon, their wives were told the mines needed fewer hands. 1 widow was handed a Bible and told to pray. No graves were dug. Cain didn't bother hiding the consequences. He wanted her gone. But he didn't want her dead. Yet. She walked into the chapel at noon. The congregation turned without turning. Eyes forward, minds backward, Cain stood before them, voice rising like smoke, soft at first, then heavy. He spoke of sin. He spoke of wolves. He spoke of women who came bearing fire and pretended it was light. She didn't move. She didn't speak. But he saw her. And he smiled. That night, someone tried to burn the saloon. Delilah's girls put it out with whiskey buckets and their bare hands. One of them whispered, "He knows." By the next morning, Harlan Griggs, the old sheriff, was found drunk on the steps of the church with his badge nailed to his palm. He hadn't worn that badge in 10 years. But now it bled. She went to him. Sat beside him. He didn't speak for a while. Then, all at once, he said too much. The fold didn't start with Cain. It started with Finch. But Cain perfected it, replaced the gallows with guilt. Ropes with rumors. Guns with Godspeak. No one needed to disappear anymore. They disappeared themselves. But there was one thing Cain feared. His past. The fold ran on obedience. But Cain ran on lies. He wasn't born in grace. He was born in blood. The judge's blood. Illegitimate. Beaten. Hidden. Forgotten. When he returned, he came not as a son, but as a reckoning. She asked Harlan for names. He said none. Just one. A girl. Still alive. Still hiding. Mara. She found Mara 2 miles out, tending goats with eyes that didn't blink. Mara had once been Cain's salvation. Now she was his shame. She spoke slowly. Like her words hurt to leave her mouth. Cain had loved once, but when Mara became pregnant, the fold decided she was impure. Cain let them take the child. Said it was for cleansing. Said it would be raised in scripture. She never saw it again. She stayed silent. Until now. She gave her a book. Leather-bound. Cain's first sermons. Before the town. Before the church. Before the fold. The pages were stained with something that looked like ink, but smelled like rust. Inside, scribbled between lines of holy rage, were names. People. Dates. Deaths. Proof. It was enough. Enough to burn Cain. Enough to burn the fold. Enough to burn the town, if she chose. But proof meant nothing without a voice. She stood outside the church the next morning. Waited for the bell to ring. Waited for the people to file in. Then she stepped forward, Not with a gun. With the book. She threw it on the steps. Said nothing. Just looked at them. One by one, they stopped. Read. Recognized. And turned away. Not from her. From him. Cain stood behind the pulpit. For the first time, his voice trembled. He ordered them to leave. No one moved. He called for the deputies. None came. He reached for the Bible. It fell. The silence that followed was louder than any sermon. The fold cracked. Not with a bullet. But with a whisper. And the town began to remember how to speak. The church was packed that morning. Not because they believed, but because they were afraid not to show up. Fear sat heavier than scripture in that room. Cain stood at the front like he always had, hands raised, words polished, sins hidden behind the collar. But there was a shake in his voice, just enough for the oldest to notice. The choir didn't sing. They hadn't in weeks. He was halfway through his sermon when the doors opened. She stepped in. Every head turned. Every breath stopped. She didn't speak at first. She walked down the center aisle with steps that sounded louder than the organ ever had. Cain didn't move. He didn't need to, yet. Then she said it. Tell them the truth. Cain's hands tightened. His mouth twitched. He called her a liar. A demon. A ghost. He told them she'd come to undo what was left of their peace. He said her name like it was poison. Then he reached for the gun hidden beneath his robe. He fired the first shot into the air. The stained glass shattered. People screamed. But she didn't move. Not when he fired again. Not even when Delilah stepped in front of her and took the bullet meant for her chest. She caught Delilah as she fell. Set her down. Didn't look back. Cain was reloading. She leapt over the front pew and tackled him into the pulpit. Wood cracked. Cain cursed. The pistol clattered to the floor and slid under the front row. She got to her feet first. Cain reached for the Bible and swung it like a brick. It hit her jaw, but she didn't fall. She grabbed him by the collar and dragged him back to the center of the room. You want to preach? She shouted. Preach the truth. Cain tried to spit. She hit him once. Not to hurt, but to silence. You think they don't know? She asked the room. They know. They've always known. They just wanted someone else to say it first. Cain shouted about salvation. About forgiveness. About God. She told them about the child they buried without a name. She told them about the woman who screamed for help until the church bells drowned her out. She told them about the boy who never made it home from the mines. She told them about her brother. Hanged on Cain's orders. No trial. No crime. The room stayed silent. Until one voice, old, cracking, spoke from the second row. Is it true? Cain didn't answer. Another voice joined. Tell us. Then another. Tell us what you did. Cain fell to his knees. The robe no longer looked white. He tried to speak. Couldn't. She stepped aside. Do it now. And Cain began to confess. Not with tears, but with fury. Like every word burned him on the way out. He named names. Spoke of secret meetings. Of townspeople bribed to stay quiet. Of graves unmarked by choice. He spoke of the fold, a brotherhood that worshipped power and used scripture as its sword. When he finished, he tried to run. The townspeople didn't let him. They blocked the doors. She didn't stay to see what they did to him. She turned. Walked back down the aisle. Stepped over broken glass. Past Delilah, who lay breathing shallow. She didn't look back. Cain's voice faded into begging. Then screaming. Then silence. When the doors shut behind her, the town was no longer quiet from fear, but from reckoning. And she knew. This storm wasn't over. But it had finally changed direction. They buried the truth with the rest of the dead that week. Not in secret, not with fear, but openly, in daylight. The town gathered, for once, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The saloon stayed closed for 3 days. Delilah pulled through. A bullet to the side, but not the heart. When she finally opened her eyes, she asked for a drink. Then she asked if the girl had stayed. She hadn't. The sheriff's badge lay on the desk, untouched, but Harlan sat beside it each morning. He hadn't taken a sip since the gunfight. Said the whiskey no longer burned like it used to. Said it reminded him too much of Cain's sermons, warm at first, then rotting from the inside. No one saw the woman after that Sunday. Some said she rode out that same night. Others claimed she stayed a while, sleeping in the empty church, listening to the silence that Cain used to fill. But she was seen, once more. It was the child who found her, the one who never spoke much since his father disappeared into the mines. He followed the trail down to the edge of the old rail line, where she sat polishing the same knife she'd carried on her belt since the day she arrived. He didn't speak at first. Just watched. Then finally, he asked what no one else had dared to, "What's your name?" She looked at him. Held his gaze. A long silence passed before she whispered, "Call me Mercy." He didn't ask why. Just nodded, and walked back. By the time he turned around, she was already gone. No one saw her leave. No one heard hoofbeats. No cloud of dust followed. But the town changed. The preacher's sermon stopped echoing in people's heads. The saloon laughter returned. Harlan fixed the porch of the sheriff's office and never once stepped back into the bar. Delilah reopened the broken spur. First drink free, for those who had the guts to ask how it all really ended. The town didn't forget her, but they didn't chase her name either. They just called her what the boy said. Mercy. And for once, Dead Man's Hollow lived up to its name, not because it was haunted, but because the ghosts were finally at rest. Some say she was justice. Others say she was wrath. But no one could ever say she stayed. Long after the dust settled, folks in Dead Man's Hollow kept telling her story, but never the same way twice. Some swore they saw her again, weeks later, riding north toward Devil's Backbone. Said she stopped a hanging by staring down 5 men with rifles. Never drew her weapon, just looked at them till their hands started to shake. Others claimed she passed through Stillwater and left behind a judge's gavel split in half and a mayor too scared to speak. One old woman in Copper Ridge said she saw her in a chapel, not praying, just sitting. Staring at the cross like it owed her something. Then she vanished before the next bell rang. In every town she passed, stories followed. Whispers behind doors. Questions nobody dared ask out loud. But the fire always came. Not flames, not smoke, but change. Sheriffs either got braver, or packed up. Judges started reading the law instead of twisting it. Men who once ruled by fear started locking their doors at night. And the ones who had things to hide? They felt it. Like footsteps in dry grass. Like a storm not yet on the horizon but close enough to taste. And just when people started to think they'd imagined her, they'd hear it. The slow creak of floorboards in the dead of night, the thud of boots outside a jailhouse. The soft metal spin of a revolver's chamber. Then silence. Then change. She never gave her name again. She never stayed long. But the places she passed through, they never stayed the same. Some say she was an angel. Others swear she was a ghost. But all of them agree on one thing. The fire didn't stop in Dead Man's Hollow. It follows her. Still. They say the West was written by the hands of lawmen, outlaws, and land barons. But that ain't the whole truth. Sometimes, it was a woman with a broken past and steady aim who rewrote the ending. And sometimes, she didn't wait for permission. If you're still here, listening, then maybe you're like us. Drawn to the stories no one else dares to tell. Stories buried under dust and silence. Stories of women who didn't ride in to be saved, but but to settle scores. So if you want more tales like hers, more blood-soaked justice, more whispered names, more legends that never made the books. They say the West was written by the hands of lawmen, outlaws, and land barons. But that ain't the whole truth. Sometimes, it was a woman with a broken past and steady aim who rewrote the ending. And sometimes, she didn't wait for permission. If you're still here, listening, then maybe you're like us. Drawn to the stories no one else dares to tell. Stories buried under dust and silence. Stories of women who didn't write in to be saved, but to settle scores. So if you want more tales like hers, more blood-soaked justice, more whispered names, more legends that never made the books, subscribe. Because her story ain't the only one. And next time, the fire may follow someone else. Now you tell it. Was she right to let the town decide Reverend Kane's fate? Or should she have pulled the trigger herself? Drop your answer in the comments. We'll be watching.